Sean todos muy bienvenidos a un nuevo update. En esta ocasión los quiero invitar a que revisemos una entrevista que tuvimos con dos de los máximos responsables de uno de los videojuegos más esperados de este año. Me refiero a The Order Wars 2. Tuvimos la posibilidad de hablar con Matthew Singh, quien es Design Director, y también con Brandon Adler, quien es el director del videojuego. Así que los invito a que nos adentremos un poco más en el universo de The Order Wars 2. Cuando hablamos de títulos de Obsidian, sin duda pensamos en grandes RPGs que dejan una marca en la industria y que también son recordados por muchos jugadores. Pero también la evolución es algo importantísimo, sobre todo en una secuela de una franquicia. The Order Wars 2 busca ir más allá de lo que vimos en la primera entrega. ¿Cuál es el cambio más importante que marca esta nueva versión?
I mean, there's so many. The biggest thing is like the actual footprint and size and the amount of content that we made. That's what I would say is kind of like the largest thing that we did, and it was the thing that took maybe the most in terms of trying to figure out how to actually support that. You can even see that with Paradise Island when you're first starting to play the game. Like the areas feel big, expansive, contiguous. We tried to reduce loading times and loading screens. But the more important element in those was making sure that they were filled with cool, fun content to kind of explore and find. And again, that was in reaction to what a lot of players had listed as like the biggest thing that they wanted addressed was they wanted more, but they wanted that better exploration experience as well. And so we spent a lot of time and effort evaluating games that do open world really well, things like Elden Ring or Breath of the Wild. And how can we incorporate some of those elements, some of the things that they're doing inside of their content? How can we build out our areas in ways which feel stronger to kind of go and explore? And so, yeah, I think that's probably the biggest thing that we ended up doing.
Obsidian tiene una reputación sólida en narrativas RPG, pero con cada proyecto surgen ideas frescas. ¿Cómo logra el equipo mantener su estilo característico mientras introduce novedades?
For The Outer Worlds 2, we actually really harkened back to some of our earlier projects as well. A lot of inspirations from like Fallout New Vegas, right? And we looked at this world that we had built. And in the first game, we really heavily looked at, say, our corporations, right? And that satirical take on them. One of the things we wanted to do is broaden that in meaningful ways. And so we added in new perspectives to the world, these new factions with the Order of the Ascendant, that is kind of like a religious order, and the Protectorate, that is this authoritarian regime. And we thought that this trifecta gave us a much broader range of possibilities there and viewpoints about how people are governed in the world, which help us kind of deepen that story and deepen the narrative of what was going on in this world. Now, what we did though is we framed it around a central problem, right? There's this thing going on in this Arcadia colony that's very easy to understand. This is this big threat, and the player has to deal with it. And we start with some personal relationships that really have to be dealt with in a meaningful way that helps kind of get the player going. But as they start exploring the world more, as they start exploring the problem space and these factions, they see, oh, I see, each of these factions has a very different viewpoint of how to solve this problem. And now I have to start figuring out, do I align with any of their unique philosophies? Do I feel like maybe it would be better to try and combine these in some way? Or do I feel like, you know what? I want to do it my way, and I don't think that any of these people should be involved. I'm going to do it for myself. And so we allow the player to do that in any way they would like. Really, we're here to allow the player to tell their story more than anything else, right? We set up the world, we set up the conflicts, we set up the players here, and then we allow you to get dumped into the world and say, what do you want to do with it? And now we react to your actions without clear judgment of you as the player, but the world is going to react in natural ways. Hey, if you're going to push the boundaries on this thing, you're going to feel the world pushing back, and now you're going to have to deal with that in interesting ways. And hopefully what this comes to is that everybody's story is a little different, and when, you know, 5 people go and play through this game and then come together to compare stories, there's going to be a lot of like, wait a minute, I didn't see that thing at all, or I never met that person, yet they seemed like a very big part of what your story actually encapsulated, right? And that's what we want. We want these very different stories to be told through setting the stage and allowing the world to react in interesting ways.
Uno de los pilares de la primera entrega es la toma de decisiones. En esta secuela, los personajes y facciones cobran aún protagonismo. ¿Cómo se asegura el equipo de que cada elección del jugador tenga un impacto real?
Well, I mean, it's just the philosophy at the beginning of the game, right? So when we're talking about your choices mattering, a lot of time that's talking about the reactivity of your choices, right? So the things that you're doing inside of the world, those choices you're making, the world needs to react in a very believable way to the player. And so we go out with that mission when we're talking about even small stuff, but all the way into like the larger machinations of the factions themselves. Like there's plenty of opportunity where you can make the factions work together and get them to work together if you have the right skills and you've done the right things. You can also turn them against each other in ways where you're only going to be able to work with one or the other. Those are those types of choices that we're talking about, right? Those are the types of things that allow the player to really tell their own story. You know, something we like to say is that again, very early on, one of the overall goals was, when 5 different people play the game, I want 5 different stories. I want 5 different people that are like, oh, I had no idea you could even talk to this person. I had no idea that you could go do this thing. And how did you go and do that? Like, those are the types of stories we wanted players to be able to tell. Because again, it's a very personal thing. Like an RPG, how they're building out their characters, how their personalities play out, how they interact with the world is very personal. But it also, again, it needs to react properly to that, or the player is going to immediately see through that as something that just feels false. And so we spent a lot of time figuring out in the stories themselves, in the micro, in the macro, how do we have that reaction, and how do we make that feel good, even if at times the players are cutting themselves off from certain pieces of content or leaning harder into other pieces of content. That's what kind of really truly makes that fun.
Más allá de la historia, el gameplay también evoluciona, desde el combate hasta la exploración. Hay novedades que vale la pena destacar. ¿Qué nuevas mecánicas o mejoras sobresalen en esta entrega?
Yeah, really early on, we identified kind of combat, exploration, all these things as like a big place for us to improve, right? And we did that. First, we started with, or first I started with at least, the combat aspect, which was even before the game had released, we had the opportunity to give a build of our game over to 343 Studios, now Halo, and they were able to do a deep critique, kind of looking at our systems, how they play together, and just gave us some advice, really nice collaborative advice that would help us make our weapons feel more distinct. And in that same time, I was doing a lot of research on various shooters to try to pull some inspiration. I played a lot of Destiny at that time to see like how they are doing differences in their gun feel. And then we took those learnings and applied it to our game when looking at our animations, looking at our recoil patterns, looking at our bloom, our weapon sway, looking at things like our reload animations to give more character to each of these weapons. Through all of those things together, we tried to make each of our weapon classes feel very distinct from each other. And then as we were growing these bigger worlds, we wanted exploring these worlds to feel more engaging as well. So we looked at player mobility, and we did things like add in slide and double jump and parkour systems so that it's just more fun to engage with exploration of these worlds. And because we did that, we were able to give those same capabilities over to our enemies. So now your enemies can chase you down and jump up to areas, and we've given both the player and enemies like grenades so that they can flush each other out. We have destructible cover so that if you see like a sniper on the ridge, you have the opportunity to destroy their cover, and now they have to scramble and figure out where else they're supposed to go. And we felt like all of those things were going to make just the moment to moment more dynamic across the board. There are things like our stealth toolkit has been expanded by having the ability to take sneak attacks. We have things like damage preview, where you can look at an enemy and see, am I going to one-shot them or not? and that might play into your strategy. We have things like gadgets that can dissolve bodies so they can get them out of the way for you, or new gadgets where you can see through walls and start assessing threats through a space. We have things like distraction devices to start moving patrols around. And so we tried to like add in all of these additional toolkit items for the player just to be able to express themselves more fully in these gameplay spaces. But what we didn't want is for that to overshadow the role-playing aspect of it, right? That's the core of our game, is trying to figure out how can you make interesting builds and how can you express those in fun and unique ways. And so that's where we did like an kind of a bit of an overhaul of our perk system, where we have over 90 perks in the game. We've got a ton of options there. And they really lean heavily into the types of skills that you're going to be developing for your character. And these things can really dramatically change the way that you're going to be playing the game, and ask you to like try to develop a build of your own. One thing that we tried to explore is what are some kind of non-traditional builds that we might be able to generate as well, as we started discovering things like our toxicity system, where, hey, as you're using your inhaler, you're taking this poisoning, or you might be taking poisoning from things like xyranium. Are there things that we could do to support the player for that mechanically? And there are some really fun things that you can do there. Hey, we support the ability to kill everybody in the game if you'd like. Well, if somebody starts engaging in that, are there some perks for them that we could actually give them to start leaning into that as a play style? All of those things were ways that we were trying to merge that kind of improvement on moment to moment and player toolkit, but merge them into the deep RPG systems that we've been building for the game.
Toda secuela se construye sobre lo aprendido. El primer juego dejó enseñanzas claves para el equipo. ¿Hubo alguna lección importante que haya influido directamente en el desarrollo de esta nueva entrega?
You're talking about like specific feedback that maybe we received and what we wanted to do with that. Yeah, I mean, some of it was just an internal shift in terms of wanting a deeper, stronger RPG experience. Personally, I think that RPGs are at their best when, again, they allow for those deep, reactive builds that you can make. That the world itself is kind of really changing around you as you're making these really decisions that are just, sometimes they can be heart-wrenching decisions. They can be hard things that you have to sit and you have to really think of, like, how do I want to move forward with this. And that was kind of the driving force between all of this, because I think that some more modern RPGs have maybe not really doing some of those things. They try to soften it a little bit. They get rid of the rough edges. They don't want any friction at all. They'll even do things like, hey, there's an objective marker that leads you directly to the thing that you'd like. Oh, there's a key behind a thing over, like, it'll just say go directly over there, pick up the key, and then go over and do that thing. So we wanted to take a step back from that, right? We wanted the player to have to engage with the game more, have to think a little bit more about what they were doing. So when you're making your character, like, these things matter, and so you should really think about what you're doing. When a flaw is offered to you, think about that. Like, do I want that for my player build? Because these could be big things that have big changes and big choices. Even something as simple as, like I was talking about with the objective markers, we don't lead you directly to stuff unless you've been told very specifically, go over to my shelf and grab this thing, and there's an objective marker there. A lot of times there's an area, and we point you to an area, but you need to go and explore that area and find that stuff out. We don't do things like allowing respec, because we want the player's choices to matter to them, and we don't allow you to necessarily redo all of these things. Like, these are choices you've made. Now this is your story, and you need to push that forward and continue on with that thing. But these are all things that, I guess they're a little scary early on, because you don't know how people are going to react to that stuff. But we knew early that we wanted to bring back kind of those older Obsidian, older just, golden era RPG things forward. We wanted to bring that forward because we knew players really, truly love those things. And that if we could do it right in Arkansas, or excuse me, The Outer Worlds 2, if we could do that properly, we knew that people would fall back in love with how RPGs used to be back in the day. And again, you see that even with other studios and other games, like, you know, Baldur's Gate 3. They're doing the same thing, right? We're bringing back that whole flavor of a real, true role-playing experience, and I think players really enjoy that, and that's one of the reasons we lean hard into that.
I know you're also asking about, like, were there any technical things that we needed to overcome? Well, so Unreal traditionally isn't really built for big, expansive worlds, right? And so that was one thing that as we went from the first game to the second, we had an opportunity of, like, okay, let's see how far we can push these bigger worlds. It was something that people wanted from the first game, and we wanted to give them in the second game. So we use things like Nanite now, we use things like Lumen now, we use, you know, the different way that we partition out our worlds in ways that allow us to create these larger spaces. Still have to be careful with, like, our density of object placement, of how our AI is constructed and whatnot. But that was something that, because we went to a new version of Unreal, which took us some time and struggles to try and get set up correctly, allowed us to start exploring things where we have fewer loading screens in this game than in the first game, because we were able to put more of our points of interest on the overland map itself. There are fewer times where we have to do a hard load, and so things like that helped us essentially make that world feel both larger and more contiguous.
Hacer una secuela no es fácil. Decidir qué conservar y qué dejar atrás es parte del proceso creativo. ¿Hubo algo que el equipo eligió no repetir esta vez?
Yeah, I mean, you know, to your point, it's when you're making a sequel, it's you have to try to understand what the core of the first game was. Those are the things you can't lose, right? So for us, that's, you know, the dark, absurd humor. Like, we knew, okay, we got to go ahead and bring that forward. We adjusted those types of things, right? Like, we were like, all right, well, now what's our take on that? How do we expand on that? And we kind of did that throughout. Like, but when we were first starting the game up, I sat down with Matt and we went through every single system in the entire game. It took us a few weeks. And we broke down every single thing that the player could be doing. And we said, okay, this is good and we want to keep this, or we want to remove this entirely, or we want to modify this and improve this in some way. You know, so you'll have things like the flaw system where we wanted to keep that, but we wanted it improved. And so Matt and his team sat down and really reworked that system entirely. And then there's other things where it didn't really match what we wanted to do, or we couldn't figure out a good solution that we personally enjoyed. Something like the disguise system, where we're like, all right, we're going to remove that from the game because that's not the type of experience that we want to give when we're doing the stealth things. And so, you know, so we're going to kind of modify that a little bit and change things around. You know, but there's so many of those things to kind of mention in terms of what it is. But again, I think at the end of the day, no matter what you're doing, you need to be true to the original. You do not want to change the game too much, right? Like, people like the Outer Worlds. Do not mess with the formula so much that it's not recognizable any longer. You know, it's more like, where can we accentuate those things that people loved? Where can we take those things, again, like the flaw system, where there's something really great there, but people were not engaging with it in the way that we want? And kind of, you know, how do we rework those things? Things like the combat stuff, right? We knew those are the types of things that players really, really wanted. They wanted more dynamic, fun, moment-to-moment gameplay in that combat system. So Matt and his team sat down and really broke that apart. And that's one of those things where it's like, that doesn't change the formula of the game to me, right? The game at its core is still the same, but now it's more fun to engage in that aspect of the game. And so those are the things that you're looking for, I think, in a sequel, is like, where can we take those elements that don't change the core functionality and what this game is, yet improve it to the point where now you just up the fun factor significantly. And so yeah, that's where a lot of our effort was spent in trying to figure that out.
The Outer Worlds 2 no solo busca entretener, sino que dejar una huella. ¿Cómo les gustaría que los jugadores recuerden esta entrega cuando piensen en los juegos de Obsidian?
I hope they recognize it as the most fun, deep RPG and the most reactive one that we've ever made. Like, that was the goal from the start, is to make a game that players at the end of it go like, oh my god, I can't believe how much was there. I can't believe all the different things that I didn't even get to see. And I hope that at the end of the day, when they're talking to their friends about this stuff, that they have just all these crazy stories that are all just very different from each other, and get them excited to maybe even play again. That's what I hope people view us at the end of all of this.
Yeah, similarly, I hope that people see it as kind of a return to form, see it as like harkening back to Obsidian's roots and its core in terms of deep RPG experiences, and that people really enjoy that aspect of it.
Y por supuesto, no pudimos dejar pasar la oportunidad de pedirle a Brandon y a Matthew que inviten a los jugadores chilenos a que conozcan este nuevo título.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, there's a reason that we want as many people to be able to play the game as possible, right? Like, we spent a lot of time localizing the game, for people, and making sure that like those localizations were really good. We actually had multiple localization teams do localizations and then cross-check each other just to make sure that like, okay, this is the highest quality thing. And again, this is also, we can get as many people playing the game as possible, because like these are shared experiences. That everybody loves RPGs. Chilean players, we know that they love RPGs too, and we're here for them, and we really want to reach out to them and make sure that like they're also having a really good, fun time. And yeah, that's what I would say is I really hope that they do enjoy it, because this was a labor of love, and again, I think that a good RPG is something that is universal to everyone.
Yeah, and to Brandon's point, we really want to make the game available to anybody that wants to play it. So that's why we did, release on PlayStation, Xbox, on Game Pass, on Battle.net, on Steam, everywhere we could put it. We tried to put it, and for more people to be able to play the game, we have things like motion sickness modes, or we've introduced a third-person camera so that people that struggle with the traditional first-person experience have an option as well, so that they can play the game. We really just are trying to make it so that as many people that want this style of experience, they're craving that, have the opportunity to jump in and play. And we hope they enjoy it.
In 2025, welcome back to the future. Try not to break it again. The Outer Worlds 2.